Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Michael Cox, and I am the worship associate for our virtual service today, alongside our minister, Zachary Vincent. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time now, either now or later, in the service to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, and the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. If you did not have an opportunity to watch the inauguration and the celebration that followed, including the powerful poem by Amanda Gorman, I would definitely encourage you to take a few moments to watch and reflect. It was inspiring. I remember 4 years ago, in President Trump's inaugural address, he focused on his vision to make America great again. He highlighted policies of the Obama administration that he believed were bad for the country and stated that this American carnage stops right here and stops right now. In contrast, President Biden, in his inaugural address on Wednesday, said, "To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy, unity. Without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward." I started to cry when I listened to President Biden's words, and several times during celebrations that followed. I reflected on why I was so emotional and why I was taking this so personally. I realized that I was taking this so personally for many reasons, but one that stood out was that over the past 4 years, there has been a focused effort to overturn the work I and many of my friends and colleagues have accomplished over the past several decades at the Environmental Protection Agency. As many of you know, I worked for EPA for over 25 years. I was proud of the work I had accomplished over those many years, and to see it being undermined was disturbing. I saw drinking water standards that I'd worked on being relaxed. I saw programs that I'd worked on to reduce toxic chemicals in some of our greatest water bodies, the Great Lakes, Puget Sound, and the Columbia River, being challenged and overturned. I remember the EPA Administrator, Scott Pruitt, saying that addressing climate change was not, in his mind, critical to achieve EPA's mission to protect human health and the environment. I saw my position as a climate change advisor eliminated, and many of the programs I had initiated with states, cities, and businesses stopped. So yes, I did take the actions by the past administration personally. When I heard the words of President Biden and realized that it was a new day in America, I was brought to tears. And those tears, as I said, continued throughout the day as I watched people from around the country celebrating the change that is before us. I believe we are emerging from the dark that has descended upon our country, and we can see the early light of a new dawn. But I'm not naive. It will not be easy to achieve the unity that President Biden calls for. But our ability to achieve a new day in America will require all of us individually and collectively to not just take comfort in the words of President Biden, but to actively participate in the hard work of healing our country. It will take imagination and courage to move us forward, but I think it is possible. I believe we have an obligation to our country, ourselves, our families, our kids, and our grandkids to start the hard work to move from the dark into the emerging light of dawn. Because, to be honest, what's the alternative? I dedicate the lighting of our chalice to the call from President Biden for unity, and for us as a congregation to heed that call and be active participants in the healing needed in our country to move forward into the future. Thanks.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our brothers and sisters, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
1, 2, 3, go! 1, we see that there's a wrong to be righted. We know that we are strong and united. We exercise our right to assemble. That's when the proud and mighty start to tremble. Nothing takes one ring, nothing takes one ring, nothing takes one ring.
I don't know about all of you, but after the inauguration on Wednesday, I feel like a weight has been lifted off of me. Now, I know that there is still work to be done in our country and things that we as a faith community need to respond to. But with the changing of the administration, I can't help but feel just a little bit more hopeful. Hopeful that the tone of the conversation within our nation will shift to affirm the worth and dignity of the people who are at the table. Hoping that the new administration will make opportunities to ensure that more people are at the table when decisions are being made. In all, I feel pretty good about where we are in this moment. And with that, I want to invite you to take a moment with me, to take a deep breath in and out, Let yourself be unburdened of those worries and anxieties that we have been carrying. Know that they will still be there, but in this time together, we can put them down, to be present to one another in this virtual space as we come together this day to worship. Come, let us worship together.
I'm going to tell you a story today based very, very loosely on a children's book by LeVar Burton. So, in my story, there's a hippo named Howard. And Howard the hippo lives in a time before time, a time when the world is still filled with magic. And Howard and his family of other hippos and all of their friends live in a river valley. And Howard, who's still a young hippo, is growing up, playing in the river, eating, wandering around, seeing his friends, just generally having a wonderful time. And then one day, while Howard is playing, all alone as it turns out, his family has gone to look for food, his friends are off somewhere else, but Howard is happily splashing in the water, and a storm comes up. And when I say a storm, I mean a storm, a huge storm with lightning and thunder and wind and rain that begins to tear apart the world that Howard knows. The mountains begin to crumble. The water begins to blow away in the wind. Everything seems to be being destroyed. Howard is distressed. He's upset. He doesn't know what to do. He's watching as his world is being destroyed. And so Howard does the only thing he can think of. He opens his big hippo mouth and swallows the storm. Yes, Howard swallows the storm. And so now that enormous storm is inside of Howard. It feels like there is a tornado inside of Howard because there is a tornado inside of Howard. And so Howard finds himself spinning and spinning and spinning deep into a deep, deep hole. And finally, the storm begins to fade, and Howard realizes everything he loves is gone. And he is down in the bottom of a deep, deep hole. And Howard feels terrible. His head hurts, his stomach hurts, his whole body is buzzing because he has swallowed the storm and it is inside of him. He feels so bad he doesn't know what to do, so he curls up in a ball at the bottom of this very deep hole and waits. He feels completely defeated. The next day, his friend, Max the mosquito, this is a time before time when mosquitoes were still friends. Max the mosquito buzzes down to Howard. Bzzz, he says, Howard, Howard, wake up. We have to rescue you, Howard. Howard says, "Go away, just leave me alone. I feel so bad." Max keeps buzzing. He keeps poking Howard with his nose, but nothing is working. Howard does not want to feel better. Howard feels bad. Mosquitoes aren't known for their persistence. Well, actually they are. But back in the day, mosquitoes were not known for their persistence. And so Howard stays down there, but Max gives up and he goes back up. But he does tell his friends, the birds, and the birds, a whole host of different birds, begin to fly down into the hole and keep Howard company in his misery. Sometimes the birds offer encouraging words. "Howard, it's going to be okay. Let us help you." And sometimes they just sit quietly on Howard's head, just keeping him company. Howard feels so bad. He doesn't know what to do. But gradually, he realizes his friends are still there for him. And he thinks, "Okay, I feel really bad, like I swallowed a storm, but what can I do?" And the birds hear this and they fly back up and they tell the other animals. And Jennifer the giraffe says, "I have an idea." She finds a rope. And she finds all of the biggest animals because hippos are big. She finds all of the biggest animals and then she puts her very long neck down into the hole. And she says, "Howard, we're going to pull you out." Howard says, "I'm really, really heavy even though I'm a little hippo." Jennifer says, "Don't worry, we got it." And so all of the animals tug and pull, and Howard is released from the deep, deep hole. He still has the storm inside of him, though. His body still feels bad. His head is still so buzzy and heavy, and he doesn't know what to do. And Jennifer gently leans down to him and says, "Howard, you're gonna have to let the storm out." Howard says, "I don't know how. I'm scared." "You can do it, Howard," she says. And Howard finds himself starting to cry. First one tear rolls down, and then another, and suddenly the entire storm comes pouring out of Howard in his tears. Howard cries so much and for so long that the river reappears, and it floats back out to the sea. And Howard, once he has had a good long cry, looks and sees that the river is back. The land is still in need of repair, but many of his friends are there, and they get to work. And so even though it will never be the same as it once was, Howard realizes that he can help to rebuild. He's let go of the storm, and he can join with his friends in healing the world that once was and rebuilding it anew. And that is my story.
Please join me in opening our hearts and minds during this time as we enter the spirit of prayer together with these words by the Reverend Beth Dana. God of many names, mystery beyond all our naming, lift us up beyond the divisions, move us beyond inaction, and heal us that we may know our wholeness within and together. As we emerge from this week's inauguration, a time of regrouping, of celebration and despair, let us continue on. May the victories energize the work ahead, and may there be space for disappointment. And then may the spirit of inspiration found in coming together stoke the fires of commitment within us. Commitment to our neighbors, to justice, to creating a better world, propelling us forward to do the shared work ahead, that our voices, that all voices may be heard, and that we may find continued ways to love and to serve. May our relationships with those whose views we share, as well as those with whom we disagree, be filled with the spirit of compassion, moving us beyond the walls of our knowing, beyond the walls of sameness, towards each other's humanity. Amen.
As we lift our voices on this day, many hearts are heavy with despair. How can our lifted voices find a way to bring us one step closer to repair? If a wounded world we wish to heal, we must sing no ordinary song. Make it a cadence relevant and real, its every measure purposeful and strong. Let this song our greatest hopes contain. Well-fed children be its just refrain. Roofs over every heartbeat be its tune. Its harmony from peaceful cities hewn. Sing of hope while hammering each nail. Sing of joy while pulling every weed. Sing to renew a covenant grown frail. May every alleluia plant a seed. May every alleluia plant a seed.
The last 4 years in our country have been hard years. The Trump administration undertook efforts that eroded relationships between the United States government and us, the people of this country, and arguably the rest of the world as well. After the last 4 years, there are many things about our country that I'm no longer certain about. Systems of checks and balances that I was taught about growing up when I was in high school and even in college seem defunct. Where was the accountability when lies were told to the American people? Where were the checks and balances when decisions were being made to strip people of their protections and civil rights? Where was the balance of power to call us back to the dream of liberty and justice for all? The damage has been done. And now here we are on this side of the destruction. And as we are poised on this side of the last 4 years, I find myself wondering, what's next? What's next for us, for our country, and the world? In Hindu cosmology, there's a belief that I kind of like, and it's a belief that time exists in cycles. At the beginning of each cycle, it is said that Lord Brahma, the creator, calls all things into being, starts the cycle by causing creation to begin unfolding. Then, once Brahma has ceased the act of creation and the world and cycle is into being, Lord Vishnu takes the lead and works to sustain creation throughout the remainder of this cycle. When the time comes for a given cycle to come to its end, when it's reached the course that it set out on, then Vishnu turns things over to Lord Shiva. Shiva is called upon and trusted to carry out the act of destruction that undoes the whole of creation. This understanding of the cosmos, of creation and time, as I said, is cyclical. It happens in cycles. So when Lord Shiva comes to undo creation, it's not seen as an end entirely. Once the destruction has taken place, again, Lord Brahma comes to create again, to restart the world, all of creation, and then again turns things to Vishnu to sustain until the cycle has run its course. And again, Shiva is called upon to tend to the task of destruction once more. This cycle goes on and on in the cosmology I'm describing. And each variation, each iteration of reality, each cycle is slightly different. What happens in one cycle doesn't necessarily happen in the next, or what happened in the last cycle doesn't necessarily happen in 2 cycles from now. But the basic structure of creation, existence, and destruction, followed by creation again, remains constant throughout each of these cycles. The interesting part of this cosmic cycle for me is that no value is placed on various phases of the cycle. Creation, existence, and destruction are not labeled as good or bad, but instead just are. They're part of the fabric of reality. Each chapter of this cycle is seen as both necessary and the logical progression of the chapter that came before. In this theology, beginning and end are essential features of existence. They are both viewed as necessary parts of what it means to be in existence. In America, we have our own civil religion, our own civic religion. And this religion has its own cycles. This cycle isn't necessarily one of creation followed by destruction on the scale of the cosmos, but on a smaller scale, the pattern beats out a rhythm that bears some parallels with the cycle I just described from Hindu cosmology. Every 4 years, when we elect and inaugurate a new administration, we enter a new cycle. Each of these periods is marked with its own characteristics, and I'll be honest, the characteristics that mark the past 4 years were not that great. There's been a lot of destruction since the day that Donald Trump took office in our country. We have all witnessed the way that the press was diminished and labeled as fake news, a tactic that made it easy to dismiss or conceal the scandals and unethical behavior of our executive leaders. Facts and science were manipulated to draw absurd and untrue conclusions that gave rise to conspiracy theories that stoked the hateful passions of millions of people. It was hard to miss the rhetoric of walls that caused fear to drive our immigration system, separating children from parents and leaving people locked in cages in inhumane conditions. Who can forget the pain felt across the country in the wake of the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? Killings that reminded us that racism and white supremacy are alive in the world, are alive in this country. And as protests broke out demanding action and accountability, the White House labeled those protesting as terrorists. I think also of the destruction caused by the mishandling of the COVID-19 response in our country, a non-existent strategy that has left us floundering as a nation. This response has left more than 406,000 people dead in our country. 406,000 people. The number is staggering. It's hard for me to even wrap my mind around what it is like for 406,000 people to die in less than a year's time in our nation. And yet, there hardly seems time or space for any of us who are here to mourn, since the rest of us are continuing to struggle with the realities of physical distancing, the stresses of technology mediating our interactions. We hardly have time in the midst of all of this to mourn and reflect on what this number and death means. And beyond this, the events of January 6, 2021, just weeks ago, when white supremacists and QAnon nuts stormed the Capitol building in an attempt to undermine our system of democracy. These people were acting at the explicit instructions of a sitting president when they undertook their actions, and thankfully failed in their attempts. The destruction of the past 4 years is real. And this isn't even the full list of the damage that has been done. And things won't just magically get better now that the administration has changed. The inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris does represent a shift. It is the beginning of a new cycle of sorts, another 4-year chapter. But these individuals are not saviors. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not saviors. They're people just like us, each of us. I do hope that their leadership brings a different tone to the conversation in our country. But the fact is, some of the situations that I've described, these horrors of the last 4 years, existed before the Trump administration. The failures of our immigration system, for instance. It's a travesty that predates 2016. And racism, it isn't something that just started a few years ago. The sin of racism is something that generations of people in our nation have wrestled with and will continue to wrestle with. It didn't just appear in the last 4 years. As I said, many of these issues, these destructions that we experienced in the last 4 years and the way that they impacted us are not new. Just because Trump is gone doesn't mean that it'll get instantly better. It's not that simple. It took time to get us to this point here where we are on the far side of those 4 years. And it's going to take time for us to rebuild the trust and a positive direction for our national leaders. And yet, situated on this side of all of that destruction and devastation, it does seem a little bit like new things are possible. That somehow on this side, We are at the beginning of a new cycle that feels a little bit more hopeful. It's not exactly like when Lord Vishnu comes, or Lord Shiva comes to destroy creation and Brahma comes to recreate it. It's not exactly like that. But something about this moment does feel like we've entered a new cycle, a new era. Recognizing this hope and reflecting on what to do next. A quote that I read recently came to mind. In the days following the attempted coup on January 6th, many of my ministerial colleagues posted these words on their social media accounts. The words were, "We are all responsible for what happens next." We are all responsible for what happens next. So what happens next? Where do we go from here? Like many of you, I don't know what happens next. I'm not psychic, but that doesn't mean I haven't been thinking about how we, as a community, as a church, can start to engage and play a role in the still unfolding reality that is ahead of us. Recently, the board started a conversation about belonging here at Cedars. This conversation is meant to be a chance for us to assess our ability to build relationships that bridge our differences and allow people to feel a meaningful connection within this community. For the months of February, March, and April, the board and I will be gathering stories and considering what it means to belong at Cedars, as well as the barriers that exist to true belonging in our community. We need your stories, your experiences, your participation. We're hoping to continue to gather these perspectives over the next 3 months and to use what we learn to begin crafting recommendations about where it is that Cedars will head next. How is it that we can build a deeper sense of belonging for the people who are currently here, as well as those who have yet to cross our threshold? If you haven't had a chance to participate in this conversation, I'd encourage you to. We want to hear from you. There'll be opportunities in February, March, and April on the first Sunday of each month after coffee hour for us to hear these perspectives, to share with each other and begin crafting that vision of where it is we want to go. Beyond this, another thing that the last 4 years has highlighted a need for in the world is for communities that build relationships beyond their own walls, beyond their own configurations as they exist. Here at Cedars, I've been thinking, where are those relationship opportunities for us? One obvious outlet for us to deepen our partnerships is with the Interfaith Council here in North Kitsap County. This is something Johanna Munson and I had a conversation about recently. And since that conversation, I've been thinking about it and thinking about how we could start getting involved. The opportunity is there, but the path forward is not quite certain. Recognizing that, I want to extend an invitation to all of you to come with me and join in the next Interfaith Council meeting. The next meeting is on February 4th at 7 p.m. I'll be sure to include some information in the coming weeks in the Beacon about how you can attend that virtual meeting. But I want to encourage members of this church to consider showing up together. I don't know what will come out of this showing up, but it's a first step in building those sort of relationships that get us beyond our own walls, that start building coalitions that are aimed at doing things in the community, of owning our responsibility and helping to shape what comes next for us. I'm planning to spend some time in the months ahead thinking about this idea, these relationships, and making it a personal goal of mine as your minister to begin building more relationships in the community, to spend time with some of the organizations that we do special collections with, and learn how we can get involved with the work that they are doing in a meaningful way, so that neither of us has to do this important work alone, but we can come together and collectively undertake it. This is meant to be a time for all of us, myself included, to continue exploring what it is that Cedars can do to get involved, to shape what is coming next in our world. On this side of the destruction of the past 4 years, it feels important for us to begin articulating our role as a faith community within the context we exist. What impact do we want to have? In what direction do we want to head? And what reality do we want to build together? These are hard and important questions for us to reflect on, because the truth is, we are all responsible for what happens next. And our ability to show up and to remain actively engaged will determine the reality we create within the cycle we are currently in. To the glory of life.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. May this time serve as a source of inspiration as we go out into the world, with the reminder that each of us is responsible for what happens next. May it be so.